Hawk.
Brian.
Hi, Gary. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm actually here in the mountain home. My wife was in the first Cooper horse competition.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Hi, Hawk. It's your call. I didn't mean to creep. I think it would break things. I think it's understandable. Yeah, I think it's understandable. And we did do quite an epic feat in completing the 3-year cycle last year. So we're just taking a sabbatical is all. welcome to the Ea Tolkien Society. This is our May 17th, is it? Yeah, June 17th,
June.
2023. And it is a Father's Day special edition. So, the disembodied voice you're hearing is Hawk Robinson here in the Spokane studio at the RPG Community Center. And you're hearing the dinging of people arriving. I need to run down and be down
Hundreds
there.
of people.
Yeah. But Brian and Gary are going to continue on. Hopefully Chris and the others can pop in. And Brian's going to cover some very interesting thing, some facts about Father's Day, including that
some of the founding happened right here in Spokane. So, and then we're going to be talking about Tolkien and his fatherhoodness and all of that as appropriate, which is one of the things I really like about Tolkien is the time he spent for his kids, the stories he made. You know, you and I, we've talked before. You know, my father was not a overall good person, brilliant person, but not the nicest guy. But he had his moments, and it was those moments when he did the storytelling and he drew these little things and stuff when I was a kid that were, you know, were those cherished moments. And then the entire book of Tolkien's, you know, Father Christmas and all these other things that he did are just a wonderful, wonderful thing to see about him as a father. So I'll let you, Brian, go ahead and take the helm because I got to run downstairs and supervise. Thank you so much, and I'll be back at 2:30. But and I wish you all the best, a great Father's Day to all of you, and a wonderful weekend.
Sure. And did you want to mute that, or do you want to keep the sound
I'm going to
live?
mute my microphone, and you won't
Okay.
hear it anymore then.
All
So
right. Thank you, Hawk, for that great
make it go away.
introduction. Excellent. Well, yeah. So just kind of following on from what Hawk shared, we can talk some more about Father's Day. I was just briefly looking on my bookshelf, and I don't know what I've done, Gary, with my copy of. I had a little like an old biography of j.r.r. Tolkien, but I don't know what I did with it. I think probably one of my daughters has it now. Um, but anyway, oh, the sun's coming up. Um, but all that to say, so I can't really read off of there, but from what I recall, J.R.R. Tolkien had 4 children. Christopher, of course, well known as the caretaker of his dad's estate and kind of his, you know, as an author, I think probably one of my carried the mantle of trying to make sense of his dad's writings and publishing things for many years after his father's death. And of course, his J.R.R. Tolkien passed away in 1973, 50 years ago. So since then, of course, Christopher worked on that. Also, sons Michael and there's another son, and then a daughter, Priscilla. So, which one am I missing? Well, maybe Gary or Chris can figure that one out.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know Priscilla and of course Christopher, but I didn't even know Michael. I'm
Yeah.
not up to date as well as you are, but
Well, really, I know more about Christopher as well. I think Michael was the one maybe that he started telling The Hobbit to. I think Michael might be actually older. I'm trying to remember the birth order.
okay.
I know Priscilla, I think, is the youngest, but but certainly each one of them, you know, seemed to have a good relationship with their dad, and but a different, as kids do, a different relationship with their father. And so Christopher was kind of seemed to be kind of a scholar like his dad. I think actually Christopher ended up being a professor as well and
Yes, he
teaching.
did. Yes, he did.
Okay.
Yeah, I do remember reading, I think in one of the letters that
Hmm.
JRR was really impressed with his son delivering a lecture on I forget what, but yeah. But one comment I had on Tolkien is, I think wasn't he an orphan? And he was taken care of by a Catholic priest
Hmm.
who somehow allowed him to get into the best English schools, and
Yeah,
that's,
his
that's how he
guardian.
yeah,
Hmm.
matriculated, and
Right.
how it started. So possibly not having both parents or mom and a dad was really made an impression on him. Like
Absolutely.
like World War I made an impression on him, as you might guess. So,
For sure. That's an interesting connection. We often think of World War One and its impact on Tolkien and how that influenced perhaps his writing and just the way he thought about things. But the fact that he lost his dad when he was very young and then his mother, yeah,
uh-huh.
I think so. That must have impacted him deeply. and therefore made him perhaps want to have a kind of home uh, in which that his children would would I'm going to speculate that he would want his children to know that they were loved, just because he had grown up with that experience of loss. It could have gone the other way, of course, where sometimes with loss, people they have experienced brokenness, and they have a hard time being a good parent. But in this
Hmm.
case, I think it was the opposite. Doesn't it seem that way?
I think it was I think so. I mean, I think he was trying to make up for his lack of parents during his childhood.
Hmm.
I really do. And I think from all everything I read, he was a pretty good dad.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that he made his share of mistakes, like every
Yeah.
dad. But I think he was conscientious, and he seemed to, from his writings, even though he got kind of crusty as he got older, which more and more I start to understand. He,
Yeah, you start having less tolerance for
yeah, for all this nonsense, right?
yeah,
Anyway, but he seems to be like he's not sparing in his praise. Like he will write Michael, or he'll write Christopher. Some of the letters,
yeah.
actually, he will say things that seem to be just very, yeah, encouraging, and praises his kids. We don't have. I don't think I've seen anything specifically where he's written to his daughter. But oh, and I found the other son was John. So Michael and John and Christopher were his sons, and then
Priscilla,
Chris. Hmm. Yeah.
who recently passed away.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, they're all gone now. So it really is the end of an era.
Yeah,
There are, of course, still former students of his alive. Notably, John Lennox is worth looking up on YouTube. He's an Oxford.
I did not know that. John
Yeah,
Lennox.
John Lennox, the mathematician, the math professor at Oxford, was a former.
I've seen him debate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, I'm trying to remember the exact way this worked, because Lennox, I think he was a student of Tolkien's, and he visited C.S. Lewis once when he was. This is when both of them were at Oxford,
Yeah.
before Lewis left for Cambridge. Or if it's the other way around, that he had Lewis more often, and then he went in and just listened to Tolkien once. But he was actually at one point, I'm pretty sure, in a lecture hall, and was able to listen to Tolkien speak. But anyway, there are others as well who, if you think about it, I mean, Tolkien was teaching until, I don't know, 1970, 71 before he retired. And then he
Hmm.
passed away just a few years later. So if you were a student I mean, Gary, you could have been, I mean, when did you
Well,
go
it
to,
took me a while. It took me a while to get my my bachelor's degree, but
right. But I mean, if you went to college in the 60s, you could have been a student of
yeah,
J.R.R.
yeah. Except he wasn't teaching at the University of Wisconsin.
Well, but his manuscripts ended up going to Marquette University, right?
Marquette, yeah. It's if when I get back there, I'll if I get a chance, I'll check that out because
Oh man,
yeah, if that story is just really interesting about how that happened.
it really is.
Marquette has always been a good school, but the what is it, the curator, the library, or the head librarian, whatever, just took a chance, took a gamble, and somehow I think what he paid Tolkien for his manuscripts, and so they ended up in Tolkien's from
That that
England
college
and ended up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
of all places,
Yeah.
Milwaukee. Yep, yep. That's pretty amazing. Well, it just shows too. Even if you're an Oxford Don, man, you need some cash now and then, and feeding his children and all that. So, um, he, I'm sure he wasn't making money hand over fist the uh, on the publication. He was able to live comfortably but modestly, as I understand it.
Yeah, well, this was in the 1950s, and he really hadn't taken off yet.
That's right. Well, anyway, so we just wanted to note the fact that Tolkien took his role as a father somewhat seriously. And of course, not only in terms of providing for his kids and trying to raise them well, but also as a storyteller. And that we really might not even have, well, we definitely wouldn't have probably The Hobbit in written form were it not for um, kind of the impetus, taking these stories in his head, having children kind of brought out the storyteller within him. And that then became the basis for, I think, him kind of sitting down and writing it up. So, and then his
Mhm.
kids would say, Dad, you told the story wrong. Last time you said the color was this. Gotta love that. His kids were his editors from very early on. I always thought, oh, it'd be neat if I would write down stories like that. But anyway, yeah, let's maybe talk a little bit about Father's Day then, if that sounds good to you.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, you're at the home of where Father's Day originated
that's
in
right.
Spokane. Yeah.
That's right. And uh, I am not as familiar with how to share screen. Oh, I see. I can share various things on here, but I will just say that I'm going to put in the chat. There's a great article from history.com. I'm just going to read an excerpt of that, and I'm going to just put that in the chat here. And um, so there, that should show up for you.
Yes. Yes.
But so yeah, so yes, so Spokane actually is the home of the woman who made Father's Day possible, and so history.com is one of many websites that have uh, put something up about this guy, and this is from the article: "The man who inspired Father's Day was a single dad and a Civil War vet. William Jackson Smart was a twice married, twice widowed father of 14 children, one of whom dedicated her life to the creation of Father's Day in honor of her devoted and selfless dad. The story goes that William's daughter, Sonora Smart Dodd, was attending one of the first official Mother's Day services in 1909 at her church in Spokane, Washington. And this, I happen to know, was Knox Presbyterian Church, which is still there today, kind of just north of downtown. When she had an epiphany: if mothers deserved a day in honor of their loving service, why not fathers? And then it goes back in time and just says that when Sonora was 16, her mother Ellen died, leaving William as a single father to Sonora and her 5 younger brothers. And by Sonora's account, he performed brilliantly. Quote, "I remember everything about him," Sonora said many years later to the Spokane Daily Chronicle. "He was both father and mother to me and my brothers and sisters." Sonora's mother, Ellen, herself a widow, had 3 children from a previous marriage. On top of that, William had also been married and widowed before he met Sonora's mother. William had 5 children with his first wife, Elizabeth, who were already grown when William became a widower for the second time. And then it basically goes through about how she brought the Sonora, the daughter, brought a petition before the ministers of Spokane to recognize the courage and devotion of all fathers like William on June 5, her dad's birthday. And they thought this was a great idea, but they said, oh, June 5 is going to be too soon. So they decided on the third Sunday in June. And I'm not sure why that was. Maybe it's because Mother's Day, is Mother's Day the third
No, it's like
Sunday
the
in
second,
May?
second, the second Sunday, I believe.
So they must have just looked
May.
at it and said, we need a couple weeks to pull this together. So then they went for the third Sunday in June. And so in 1910 was the first Father's Day, and it was only in Spokane, right? So this is where it began.
Yeah.
Church sermons across Spokane were dedicated to dear old dad. Red and white roses were passed out in honor of living and deceased fathers. The mayor of Spokane and governor of Washington issued proclamations. And basically, Sonora spent much of the next 60 years pushing for the official national recognition of Father's Day as a national holiday. And that actually happened um, uh, gradually. Let me just pull this up here. It says here that um, sounds like in 1916, President Wilson celebrated Father's Day in Spokane during a visit to our state. And of course, the neat thing about this is that Sonora's dad, William, was still alive when Father's Day began, which is quite remarkable. And he died in 1919 after World War I. But it wasn't until 1972 6 years before Sonora's death at the age of 96 that President Richard Nixon finally signed a congressional resolution declaring the third Sunday in June to be Father's Day. Her dad, no doubt, would have been proud. So that's pretty neat. Another quick point is that the house where Sonora Smart Dodd lived in 1910 and where she kind of set up almost like some rooms as a tribute to her father, is open. It has people living there who recognize the historical significance. In 2010, which was the centennial of the anniversary, they had their house open for it. I'm sure now it would need to be by prior appointment, but you can actually see this house, which is on Arthur Street in Spokane, just south of the Office Depot building, kind of east central Spokane. And the original house that William Smart lived in when he took care of these kids, these 6 kids, is out by it's west of Spokane, out near Brewster. So it's kind of out in the kind of like dry land farming area.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm familiar with that area. Well,
Oh, okay.
I've made a couple trips near that area.
Sure.
The horse was at Wazoo.
Okay, no problem. Sorry, I'm just responding back. So Sarah is falling asleep because it's really late in Italy. So I just said no problem, and anyway, we'll carry on. I don't know if Chris will be able to join us or not. Go ahead. You had some comments about Father's Day. Go ahead.
Well, a couple of things. I'm just wondering where Sonora's father, you said he was a Civil War vet. And when did he come west? Although I do know there were people there, like, you've heard of Pickett's Charge in the Civil War, Confederate general.
Yes.
From Virginia. And luckily it was not successful for the Union. But he was stationed in the territory of Washington at one time, up by Bellingham. And he was known, in fact, until the crazies got and renamed a bridge after him. He was the one who protected some of the tribes from the deprivations of the stronger tribes like the Tlingit and the Haida out of British Columbia. And I think he built a fort there and stuff like that. But of course, during the Civil War, even though he never owned any slaves, he remained faithful to the state of Virginia, and that's why he fought on that side. So anyway, I thought it was interesting, and that's one of the questions I have about. There was a great movement west, and I wonder when he showed up at Spokane, which couldn't have been near as large as it is today.
That's absolutely right. Then. Yeah, and of course it wasn't so much Spokane as much as the land that was opening up west of Spokane, near Creston. I just looked that up. Was where his farm was. So it's out kind of where he had an opportunity to get land. I'm sure under the Homestead Act at that point. Yeah. 1887 is the year you're looking for.
Probably it's probably when he came west.
Yeah. But here's the interesting, cool fact, which is so boggling. He was born in Arkansas, joined the Confederate Army.
Oh, wow.
Because Arkansas was a part of the Confederacy. Sure. But he was captured, and instead of being a POW, he opted instead to fight for the other side.
Oh, God.
So he went from being a Johnny Reb to being a Yank soldier, fought for the Union, and survived the war, and then was, got an honorable discharge. So there you go. I mean, here's a man for all sides.
Yeah.
And so it apparently his daughter was able, therefore, to claim both daughter of the Confederacy
and And
the
she could have been a auxiliary member of the Grand Army of the Republic,
yep,
j.r.r. They
that's
were
right.
huge. They were huge back then.
Yes, that's
They
right.
were a big political player all the
Well,
way
I
up.
think Memorial Day has its roots in is after the Civil War, and so many graves. And I know the GAR, there were cemeteries that were designated GAR cemeteries,
Yeah.
because a lot of these guys too, the ones who survived, but these veterans ended up, dying later on, and so they needed cemeteries to honor them too. And even the star, the marker. Have you seen those in cemeteries before for
No,
veterans?
I don't
They're like,
remember that anyway.
it's like a metal five-pointed star that's placed by. I know my great uncle fought in World War One, and he's buried in South Dakota, and he has a marker by his grave. But I think the GAR uh, auxiliary was involved somehow in
Okay.
that. So yeah. Well, so that's a pretty cool Spokane connection, that we hear. And of course, even though he didn't live in Spokane when he was raising those kids, his daughter did, and this is where I believe he's buried. I'm not sure if which cemetery he's in actually, but it might be in Fairview, which is because the ironic thing is that Sonora's family ended up actually owning a funeral home in Spokane. And do you know where the VA hospital is in Spokane?
No, tell you the truth, Brian, I've been there once, and that was for survival school back in 1968
Fairchild, yeah.
at Fairchild. And the only time I made it actually into the city, other than to land at the airport, was the night we graduated, and
At a party.
I was ravenous. And so a bunch of us just came into town, and I love the people there because it was back during the Vietnam War, and they were very friendly, and and I mean, we had a great time, and till we went back to base. And like I said, I've always had a good feeling about Spokane ever since. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's an interesting city for sure. Yeah. So okay, well, let's go ahead then, and we'll segue then from kind of Father's Day, since that's tomorrow, and we wanted to just kind of do a little special point on that. And I was hoping that Chris might be able to join us, but what we'll do is
I still haven't got any reply from him.
let's save this the Mabinogion for just a little bit longer. And how about if we were to find our copy of Tolkien's letters and read that next letter?
Yeah, I missed you. I got the windows open. It's a beautiful. Well, other than it's cloudy, it's a beautiful day here. It's like 75 degrees, and a motorcycle just went by, and I couldn't hear you, Brian.
I just said the most amazing thing in the world, but now I can't repeat it. Sorry, no. No, I was actually going to say, how about if we do letters of Tolkien right now,
Sure.
and then we'll go to the Mabinogion after that, and I can share from that, and we can have a discussion. So yeah, let's take a moment and get our copies of that. I loaned mine out somewhere, now I can't find it, so I'm going to pull out my electronic copy.
It's not a motorcycle. It's an ATV.
Oh, okay.
Somebody's joyriding around the neighborhood. I'll shut the window here in a second.
Find my copy.
um, did we stop in the middle of one of these long letters before?
I think we did.
Because
Maybe you can look.
that's where I got the book. That's where I got my bookmark.
Okay, I'm going to let you look at that and see if you can find where we were, because right now I'm still trying to find my copy.
14. I think it's probably letter, the draft letter to AC Nunn 214. And let me shut the window here so
That's fine. I'm still looking for my copy here. So it's rather silly because I have a digital copy, but I don't know why I can't seem to find it.
one of the things I did was move some of my Tolkien library to my cave here. So
Ah,
that
your
helps.
cave. That does help.
Yeah. But I mean, my 50th anniversary edition of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and a few
Uh-huh.
others, The Fall of Numenor,
Yep.
are all in out in the living room,
Okay. Right on.
and the Similarian also.
Hmm. Oh, this is just vexing me right now. Why can't I find my copy? This is how often I have something, but I can't figure out where I put it. So, what letter did you say we're probably on?
It, I think yeah, it's letter 214. It's the one to AC Nunn, or a draft of it.
Okay. Right. See if I can come across it somewhere in here. I'm banging away on my keyboard again, Gary.
Yeah.
I never did get that typing class in high school. That's what I blame it on.
Well, that's what I took, and it's done me very well over the years.
This is just so disappointing. Oh boy. Well, maybe I'll just have to have you read and then we can comment on it and take breaks. Go ahead and start from where you think we were last on letter 214. If you have to
Okay.
back up, you can back up a paragraph if you need to.
And okay. Anyway, I think he's trying to explain about some of his characters to this individual, Mr. AC Nunn, whatever. And so I'll start up on page 292 here. A trace of this can be seen in the account of Smeagol and Deagle, modified by the individual characters of these rather miserable specimens. Deagle, evidently a relative, as no doubt all the members of the small community were, had already given his customary present to Smeagol, although they probably set out on their expedition early in the morning. Uh, Being a mean and little soul, he grudged it. Smeagol, being meaner and greedier, tried to use the birthday as an excuse for an act of tyranny. Because I wants it was his frank statement of his chief claim. But he also implied that Deagle's gift was a poor and insufficient token. Hence, Deagle's retort that, on the contrary, it was more than he could afford. So they're somehow talking about gifts. I mean, it's been a while since I've looked at this, but he is talking about hobbits, and he is talking about some of their characteristics. I know that.
Right.
Okay, so anyway, the giving of presents by the by writing, byrding, leaving out the account, the gift, gifts to parents mentioned above, being personal and a form of thanks, varied much more in form in different times and places, and according to the age and status of the by writing. The master and mistress of a house or hole in the Shire would give gifts to all under their roof or in their service. Oh, he was talking about Bilbo's birthday party,
Yeah, right.
and yeah, how the hobbits, uh, if you were having a birthday party, you gave gifts to the guests.
That's right.
The master, the mistress of a house or a hole in the Shire would give gifts to all under their roof or in their service, and usually also to near neighbors. And they might extend the list as they pleased, remembering any special favors in the past year. Excuse me. It was understood that the giving of presents was not fixed by a rule, though that withholding of a usual gift, example to a child, a servant, or a next door neighbor, was taken as a rebuke and mark of severe displeasure. Juniors and inmates, those having no house of their own, were under no obligations as rested on householders, but they usually gave presents according to their means or affections. Not very expensive as a rule applied to all the gifts. Bilbo was in this as in other uh, as in other was in other ways an exceptional person, and his party was a riot of generosity even for a wealthy hobbit. But one of the commonest birthday ceremonies was the giving of a party in the evening of the day. All those invited were given presents by the host and expected them as part of the entertain and expected them as part of the entertainment, if secondary to the fare provided. But they did not bring presents with them. Shire folks would have thought that very improper. If the guests had not already given a gift, being one of those required to do so by kinship, it was too late. For other guests, it was a thing not done. It looked like paying for the party or matching the party gift and was most embarrassing. Sometimes, in the case of a very dear friend unable to come to a party because of distance or other causes, token invitation would be sent with a present. In that case, the present was always something to eat or drink, purporting to be a sample of the party fare. I, I think this is very interesting how he has the Hobbit culture and their different form of gift giving. Because I lived in Japan for a long time, and they have something called onigiri, and gift giving is a um, is, is an event that is governed by certain formal procedures. In other words, where your status is, who, what they, of course, what they gave you before, and and sometimes it's really onerous for people of not high means because they can't really give all the gifts that they are expected to.
Okay.
So, anyway, I just
So
thought
it's
that
that
was,
idea of kind of uh, social expectation of gift
yeah,
giving.
yeah.
But in
There's
Japan, but did they give in keeping with what their economic status was, or were they expected to give something that was more than they could afford?
I, I think, well, two things. One, people realize what economic status was, but also the person who was of that status felt, I think, shamed by not being able to provide a suitable gift.
Right.
So,
Right. Okay. I found my copy of the letters, so you go ahead and keep reading, but when you want to, I can take a turn.
okay. I think it will be I think it will be seen that all the details recorded as facts do actually fit into the definitive picture of sentiment and custom. So this picture is not sketched even in the incomplete fashion of the note. It could, of course, have appeared in the prologue. In the middle, page 12, but though I cut out a great deal, that prologue is still too long and overloaded, according to even to those critics who allow that it was some use, and do not, as some, advise readers to forget it or skip it. I think he's talking about the party now, Bilbo's 111th party, birthday party. Incomplete as it is, this note may seem to you much too long, and though you asked for it, more than you asked for. But I do not see how I could have answered your queries more shortly in a way suitable to the compliment you pay me by taking an interest in hobbits, sufficient to mark the lacuna in the information provided. In other words, the absence of information
Right,
provided.
right.
However, the giving of information always opens still further vistas, and you will no doubt see that the brief account of presence opens yet more anthropological matters implicit to such terms as kinship, family, clan, and so on. I venture to add a further note on this point, lest in considering the text in the light of my reply, you should feel inclined to inquire further about Smeagol's grandmother, whom Gandalf represents as a ruler or family of high repute, large and wealthier than most. In other words, she's the matriarch of the clan. So
Right.
anyway, if you want to take it from there, Brian, go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Gary. Good job. As far as I know, hobbits were universally monogamous. Indeed, they very seldom married a second time, even if wife or husband died very young. And I should say that their family arrangements were patrilinear rather than patriarchal. That is, their family names descended in the male line, and women were adopted into their husband's name. Also, the titular head of the family was usually the eldest male. In the case of large, powerful families such as the Tooks, still cohesive even when they had become very numerous, and more what we might call clans, the head was properly the eldest male of what was considered the most direct line of descent. But the government of a family, as of the real unit, the household, was not a monarchy except by accident. It was a diarchy in which master and mistress had equal status, if different functions. Either was held to be the proper representative of the other in the case of absence, including death. There were no dowagers. If the master died first, his place was taken by his wife, and this included, if he had held that position, the titular headship of a large family or clan. This title thus did not descend to the son or other heir while she lived, unless she voluntarily resigned. And there is a footnote here. We
Mhm.
are here dealing only with titular headship, not with ownership of property and its management. These were distinct matters, though in the case of the surviving great households, such as Great Smiles or Brandy Hall, which would refer to the Tooks or the Brandybucks, they might
Mhm.
overlap. In other cases, headship, being a mere title and matter of courtesy, was naturally seldom relinquished by the living. Back to the text of the letter. It could therefore happen in various circumstances that a long lived woman of forceful character remained head of the family until she had full grown grandchildren. Laura Baggins, née Grubb, remained head of the family of Baggins of Hobbiton until she was 102, as she was 7 years younger than her husband, who died at the age of 93 in Shire year 1300. She held this position for 16 years until Shire year 1316, and her son Bungo did not become head until he was 70, 10 years before he died at the early age of 80. Bilbo did not succeed until the death of his Took mother, Belladonna, in 1334, when he was 44 years old. Any comments on that part?
Well, he was he took over the clan when he was 44. That's pretty young.
It is actually, because
Yeah.
with hobbits, when you're in your 30s, you're still considered kind of in your tweens, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
As
44
a,
would be like, oh, okay, he's a young adult. I suppose he can handle responsibility now. Um, so yeah, of course, Bilbo and Frodo were both 50 when they set out on their great adventure, and
yeah.
I just turned 50 this month. So there.
Yeah. You're still a youngster.
Would you like to go next, Gary?
Okay. The Baggins headship then, owing to the strange events, fell into doubt. Also, Sackville Baggins was heir to this title, quite apart from the questions of property that would have arisen if his cousin Bilbo had died
Intestate. That
intestate.
means without a will.
Okay. But after the legal fiasco of 1342, when Bilbo returned alive after being pressured, presumed dead, no one dared to resume his death again. Otho died in 1412. His son Lotho was murdered in 1419, and his wife Libelia died in 1420. When Master Samwise reported the departure over sea of Bilbo and Frodo and parents in 1421, it was still held impossible to presume death. And when Master Samwise became mayor in 1427, a rule was made that if any inhabitant of the Shire shall pass over sea in the presence of reliable witness with the expressed intention not to return, or in circumstances plainly implying such an intention, he or she shall be deemed to have relinquished all titles, rights, or properties previously held or occupied, and the and the heir or heirs thereof shall forthwith enter into possession of these titles, rights, or properties, as is directed by established custom, or by the will and disposition of the departed, as the case may require. Presumably, the title of head then passed to the descendants of Ponto Baggins, probably Ponto, and it says
The second.
the second.
Yeah. Okay. Let's stop there. Okay. Very interesting. Uh, did you have any remarks on that section?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was interesting because at the end of The Hobbit, Bilbo goes home,
Mm-hmm.
and he actually, I think he and Gandalf spent like nearly a year in Beorn's place, east of the Misty Mountains. Anyway, so he finally makes it home, and they're auctioning off all his property, and he catches Lavinia Baggins with his spoons, and he's just ticked off beyond.
That's right.
Yeah.
Hand it over.
Yeah.
And he's not
And
too happy about that either, right?
no.
No. Yeah.
And so, um, the the people, the hobbits around who bought and stuff like that are just what the heck? You've been declared dead.
Indeed.
So,
Indeed.
and yeah, that's one of the funnier parts of the book, and also I think the movie that Peter Jackson did when he returns home.
Yes. Yeah, that's fun. I would like to say at this point too that um, as it refers to the fact that later events and about Frodo going west with Bilbo, so neither
Yeah.
of them had actually died. It's very interesting how Tolkien goes into this because in the culture of the hobbits that he's created, he is trying to account for how they would do things, and everything had to be done properly, the paperwork, etc. And so I was thinking about how he's distinguishing here between the sale of Bag End, which is just the personal property, right?
Mhm.
That was actually sold. Frodo sold that to Otho and Lobelia Sackville Baggins. Um, but the headship, I think, is what Tolkien is talking about, is like, who is the representative of the Baggins clan or the Baggins family? Like, yeah, who is, so so that's interesting, right? That although Lobelia is the next in line in terms of closest what would you say? Um it,
Heirs to.
yeah, well, so it's just interesting because so Frodo sells back into her, but because Frodo and Bilbo are still both alive, Lobelia owns Bag End, but she's not the head of the Baggins family yet. And it's only after Frodo and Bilbo leave, and then, like it says in the letter, Sam makes clear um, that, okay, so 6 years after they leave, the rule was made, look, if they've left, then that means then that they can be basically they're not coming back, so the next person who would inherit it. So that's just kind of interesting that from a period of time from when Lobelia dies in 1420 until Master Samwise became mayor in 1427, that the idea is that for 7 years there's this kind of legal like question mark. Lobelia's passed away, but who is the one who's the head of the family now? And so it goes to, whoever would be next. It's just kind of funny how these things are. And you hear about stories, and a lot of these are made up, but there's got to be some truth to them, of people who went off to war, never came back, or didn't come back for years, were presumed dead. The wife remarries. I have a story in my family that goes back to Norway. On my great grandfather's, no, this is on my great grandmother's side. She was born in Bergen, Norway, which is on the western coast of Norway, and gets a lot of rain, just like Seattle.
Okay, you said Ergen or Bergen?
Bergen.
Okay, I think my family might be partly from there too.
Okay, so yeah, the province is Hordaland, or Hordaland, but anyway, the crazy story is that back when Napoleon was causing trouble in Europe, there's all these weird alliances, such that England, of course, is up against France, or I should say the United Kingdom is against France.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got those forces that are allied with the United Kingdom, right? But France actually, as an ally, had Denmark, and Denmark at the time ruled over Norway. So you have the British on the sea. Of course, the British Navy was amazing, right, in the 1800s.
Yeah.
And so they're actually fighting against Danish ships and Norwegian ships. Well, so this would be, okay, let me think quickly. I don't want to bore you to tears, but since you've got a Norwegian connection, maybe you won't mind.
No, I find it very interesting, actually.
My great grandmother was named Andrea Ingebrigtsen. Her father was Ingebrigtsen, and his father was Ingebrigt von Platfuss, and he was, I think it's a German name, but he was an immigrant from Denmark, and he is found in, like, there's this family Bible that I've got pictures of. In this family Bible, it says that he was a sailor, like a ship's mate, and he was part of the Danish fleet, was captured as a prisoner of war by the British, and was gone for 7 years. So his wife remarried, or no, she didn't remarry. She was living with some man and about to get married to him. And so he comes back, and he calls off the wedding before it happens. And anyway, so, but the funny thing is, I don't know what happens to him after that, because all I know is that he says, "Hey, I'm back." Can you imagine what that would really be like. This apparently really happened, and there must be other stories of this too, where
I've heard stories like this, that somebody goes off to war and they come back and, everybody's moved on. Except,
yes, isn't
what
that
I just question for you was he declared dead? I mean, he was gone for 7 years
yeah, I don't
because he had to have been missing in action.
right. Yeah, I have not found any record that says he was declared dead. He was a prisoner of war, and I've actually not found any records of him, um, like any legal records. Just that in the family Bible, basically the last legal record I have is that he's the father of my great grandfather. Um, who was born in like 1807. I think I missed a great there. Anyway, he had a son who was born in 1807, and then
Mhm.
he went off in like 1808 or 1809. He was then in this, because the war of what we call the War of 1812, right? The Napoleonic Wars, of course, were a lot longer in
Yeah,
Europe. So that's why he was captured, and then it wasn't until 1815 when Napoleon was defeated, I think, right, at Waterloo.
yeah, defeated at Waterloo, and yeah, well, 1812. It was the unfortunate uh, foray into Russia. That was horrible. I mean, yeah,
Don't do it.
I guess back in those days, nobody knew about the winters there.
No, I'm gonna get my charge cord. Just one moment. Since it's almost 2 o'clock, should we just do maybe a 3-minute break here? I'm gonna go get my cord.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, be back in a minute.
All right.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, so am I.
Good. Well, I was hoping to find a book on my shelf that I was going to show, but it's fine. Um, we unless there was anything that we wanted to follow up on from before, we can, I think, move on now to, well, how far did we get on that letter? Did we get? We didn't finish it.
We've still got. Let me see here.
Let's see.
Um,
Oh, we're almost done.
yeah, we're almost done.
Okay, let's get done then. Yeah. Was it you reading last?
Now you were reading last.
Honto Baggins. I think that was you.
Awesome. Okay. The Baggins. What was it? Where did we stop? Anyway, the Baggins headship then, owing to strange.
I think
okay.
the next
Yeah,
paragraph
okay,
is
the next
a
one. The
well-known
next one
case.
after. Yeah, a well-known case also is that of Lilia the Great, or less courtesy the Fat. Less courteously the Fat. Fortinbras II, one-time head of the Tooks, and Thane married Lilia of the Clayhangers in 1314 when he was 36 and she was 31. He died in 1380 at the age of 102, but she long outlived him, coming to an unfortunate end in 1402 at the age of 119. But she ruled the Tooks, and the great Smiles for 22 years, a, a great and memorable, if not universally beloved matriarch. And she was not at the famous party, which was in 1401, but was prevented from attending rather by her great size and immobility than by her age. her son, Urambras, had no wife, being unable, it was alleged, to find anyone willing to occupy apartments in the Great Smiles under the rule of Lilia. Lilia, in her last days and fattest years, had the custom of being wheeled to the great door to take the air on a fine morning. In the spring of second,
Shire year.
Shire year, 1402, her clumsy attendant let the heavy chair run over the threshold and tipped Lila down the flight of steps into the garden. So ended a reign and life that might well have rivaled that of the great Duke.
Oh, that's great. Great story.
Yeah. Yeah. It was widely rumored that the attendant was Pearl, Pippin's sister, so the Tooks tried to keep the matter within the family. At the celebration of Barumbra's ascension, the displeasure and regret of the family was formally expressed by the exclusion of Pearl from the ceremony and feast. But it did not escape notice that later, after a decent interval, she appeared in a splendid necklace of her name jewels that had long lain in the hoard of the Thanes.
In other words, outwardly they said, "Oh, this is terrible, and we're going to, uh, you know, show that we're very displeased with you." But kind of backdoor channels, they're like, "Thanks a lot."
Yeah, I think they're all happy. Well, they were all happy to see Lilia go.
And for it to move on to then the next head of the family, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
which I guess would have been Ferumbras, who
yeah,
couldn't find a
that's right.
wife. But
Yeah, Ferumbras would be the son, I guess.
yeah, customs differed in cases where the head died, leaving no son. In the Took family, since the headship was also connected with the title and originally military office of Thane, and it's got a footnote here. The title and office descended immediately, and that was not held by a widow. But Ferumbus, though he became Thane Ferumbus III in 1380, still occupied no more than a small bachelor son's apartment in the Great Smiles until 1402. So,
Well, I'm trying to find out where you are. Oh, I see. You were reading the footnote.
yeah, I was reading this thing down here at the bottom. It'd be easier if you had your copy of this.
Yeah, no, I have it. I have it in front of me now.
Okay.
Um,
Customs differed in cases where the head died. Okay. Customs, anyway, opposite thing. Okay. Descent was strictly through the male line. In other great families, the headship might pass through daughter of the deceased to his eldest grandson, irrespective of the daughter's age. This later custom was usual in families of more recent origin, without ancient records or ancestral mansions. In such cases, the heir, if he accepted the courtesy title, took the name of his mother's family, though he often retained that of his father's family also, placed second. This was the case with Otho Sackville Baggins. For the nominal headship of the Sackvilles had come to him through his mother, Camellia. It was his rather absurd ambition to achieve the rare distinction of being head of two families. He probably then have him called himself Baggins Sackville Baggins, a situation which will explain his exasperation with the adventures and disappearances of Bilbo, quite apart from any loss of property involved in the adoption of Frodo.
right, right. Yeah. Okay, before we move on, okay, going back a little bit, it's a little confusing with the Shire reckoning. The Shire years, of course,
Yeah,
are different than the
that's
third age.
screwing me up too.
So I looked it up. So the year 1400, or sorry, it says so the Lalia the Great
Yeah,
was not at the famous party, Shire year 1401. That's Bilbo's 111st birthday.
okay.
So
That-
it's a year later, Shire year 1402, when she dies, and that would be basically after Bilbo disappears, but when Frodo is now the owner of Bag End. It's right. It's during those 17 years when Frodo is actually living
uh-huh.
at Bag End, because in the book, of course, he's there for a decade and a half before he goes on his adventures until Frodo turns 50 himself.
Yeah, it's that the equivalent to the third age of
Uh,
3,000
18 maybe,
something. I don't know.
something like that,
I don't remember exactly.
or 17. Yeah, it's right in that neighborhood. For when this would be, it'd be
Yeah.
earlier, because 13, 18, or 13, sorry, 3018, I think, is third age. 3018 would be the destruction of the ring. So we got to back it up 17 or 18 years. So
Mhm.
it's anyway, it's different in counting, because Shire reckoning is based on when the hobbits actually came into the Shire and how long they've been in the Shire. So Shire year 1 was the first year in the Shire. Yeah. Okay, so this is all happening basically at the beginning of the Lord of the Rings, where Bilbo has his party, and then he leaves, and Frodo's there, and these things are happening in that time while he's still there, which is, you can almost have a mini series. I'm not saying we should do this, but it'd be interesting while Frodo is still the master of Bag End, but before he goes off on his adventures. I mean, what's going on, and the adventure, what are Merry and Pippin up to? And the shame of Pippin's sister Pearl having dumped unceremoniously Lalia going down to the garden. I mean, this would make great TV, I think.
Yeah, I think Amazon would put it on if they could get the rights to it. They won't.
Spin-off, right? All right, shall I read next?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I believe it was a moot point in Hobbit lore, which the ruling of Mayor Samwise prevented from being argued in this particular case, whether adoption by a childless head could affect the descent of the headship. it was agreed that the adoption of a member of a different family could not affect the headship, that being a matter of blood and kinship. But there was an opinion that adoption of a close relative of the same name before he was of age entitled him to all privileges of a son. This opinion, held by Bilbo, which naturally contested by Otho. Um, so that's interesting point. I'm sure that's true of other families too. It's like, well, this is a child. This person doesn't have any children, so it would go to somebody else. Um, but in this case, it's a close relative. It's a nephew or whatever. So
Yeah, and, and actually it can be true to life, because in some families, when the head passes away, I mean, the children really get nasty with each other.
they can be,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
There was no reason to suppose that the stewards of Wilderland had developed a strictly matriarchal system, properly so called. No trace of any such thing was to be found among the Stewart element in the East Farthing of Buckland, though they maintained various differences of custom and law. Gandalf's use, or rather his reporter and translator's use, of the word matriarch was not anthropological, but meant simply a woman who in fact ruled the clan, no doubt because she had outlived her husband and was a woman of dominant character. Want to finish the last two paragraphs?
Okay. It is likely enough that in the recessive and decadent store country of Wilderland, the womenfolk, as is often to be observed in such conditions, tended to preserve better the physical and mental character of the past, and so became of special importance. But it is not, I think, to be supposed that any fundamental change in their marriage customs had taken place, or any sort of matriarchal or polyandrous society developed, even though this might explain the absence of any reference whatever to Smeagol, Gollum's father. Monogamy was at this period in the West universally practiced, and other systems were regarded with repugnance as things only done under the shadow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I actually started this letter nearly 44 months ago, but it never got finished. Shortly after I received uh, your inquiries, my wife, who had been ill most of 1958, celebrated the return of health by a fall in the garden, smashing up her left arm so badly that she is still crippled and in plaster. So 1958 was an almost completely frustrated year, and with other troubles and the imminence of my retirement involved many rearrangements. I've had no time at all to deal with a similarian, much though I wish to do so. And happily, Alan and Unwin also seem to wish me to do. The draft ends there. So it was interesting circumstances that he found himself where his wife had taken ill for a year or so, and then once she was healthy again, she fell down and smashed the heck out of her arm.
Got to watch out for falling in those gardens.
Yeah.
Be careful.
Yeah. Well, this was like 1958. Yeah.
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 Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah, that's a very interesting letter. I mean,
sure.
and what he did, it just proves, I don't know, the genius of Tolkien. That he created the whole and disparate worlds, of Middle Earth. If
Yeah.
you think about it, these people had all the customs, and I mean, not only did they speak, separate languages, but
Yep.
taken from other things like Welsh, and
Mm-hmm.
I was reading that today, that the elves' names were taken from Welsh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's
which
right.
and what is the world's longest word is in Welsh, and
Yes.
it's
Quill
about
will something.
it's, it's long.
Yep.
And
For sure.
I forgot what it means.
Yeah. Yeah. They just kind of added on more and more to the word.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, with the time, Gary, unless you've read portions of the Mabinogion and want to strike while the iron's hot, we could always delay until next month, and when Anthony and Chris are here to kind of
I
go over
think
this.
I think that would be good to get other perspectives. To be honest with you, the this thing is driving me crazy. I mean, there's what, four main?
Branches. I
Yeah.
found an audio book that I like. I'm going to send you the link. You might like this one.
Okay. But anyway, yeah, it's and the whole thing. There's different offshoots and everything, and it started like all stories, I think, as told by storytellers in the Welsh countryside
Yes.
back in the day. And you're talking what, after the Romans leave or something like that.
Hmm.
That's time that Arthur was, you know, Camelot was in flower, so to speak. Anyway, wherever Camelot was, and entirely made up. But they passed on and on and on, and these things were finally written about in the 12th and 13th centuries, and nobody's really um, sure about too much of anything until this British noblewoman, you know, put stuff down to paper and whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a long, but it is still fascinating, even though it's kind of thrown together and yeah, confusing. To realize that this is it's the first prose mention of Arthur in any literature,
Yeah.
because it's before the French take Arthur and kind of embellish the story of Arthur. I think the earliest reference to Arthur is in Welsh poems, I think. Um, but anyway, but there's other really great stories. What I'd like to do next time when we meet then is I have some really cool connections with the story. I just sent you the link. If you look in the chat, I've just sent you part 4. Um, and this is David Reed audiobooks, and he's got a lovely voice, and he can pronounce the Welsh, which is really a tongue twister. So he can pronounce it for you. So I would go to the chat, and I would perhaps click on that. I will also email out to Anthony and Chris and you a link as well. So if you want to do it that way, that's fine.
Yeah.
But it's basically, I find it much easier to listen to this. I found it, I didn't mind reading through it because I've read through this before twice,
Uh-huh.
but I definitely feel like his version is a little bit also easier reading, or like the wording, the translation is more just easier to understand. Uh, but there's a really great story. The one that I really like a lot, that always stuck with me, is the story about the woman, the wife made from flowers. Uh, that one, Bloodwydd, that's her name. Anyway, and have you ever read anything by Lloyd Alexander, the High King?
No, I sure haven't. I sure haven't.
Friday. Okay. Well, anyway, he borrowed a lot from the Mabinogion when he wrote those fantasy novels, and those were kind of young adult, ones. So that's probably why you didn't hear of them. They were written in the '60s, but by that point you were already in the Air Force. So, um, and again, just I'll say this again next month, but if you ever get over to Britain, it would be a huge mistake not to visit Wales. Wales has got some of the most impressive castles.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and Anglesey, which is mentioned in the Mabinogion, is an island off the coast of Wales. So it's part of Wales. And it's got some really interesting things about it as an island. But of course, it's in Welsh, it's called Mon. And this book says Mon Mam Cymru, which means uh, island of Mon, the mother of Wales. So it's kind of interesting. And
Interesting.
and then
One thing that, go ahead.
and then in 2015, when we were there last, we went to this cool place called T Mauer, which is this old house in the middle of nowhere. I mean, literally, we were following a road for 45 minutes to try to get to this place, and every once in a while there would be a sign that says "Keep going," So we finally get there, and anyway, I'll tell more next month. But it was a really cool story because the guy who's the caretaker there, he and his wife and their kids, he's the like the docent or whatever that lives on site,
Yeah, yeah.
and he started by speaking to us in Welsh, and of course I'm like, sorry, I don't speak Welsh. So then he switched to English, and he said, you have 5 daughters. He said that would make you a very rich man because in the old days in Wales, it's how many daughters you had that would give you the most power because you marry off your daughters to all these landowners who were usually a lot older than the women. Then the men would die off, and then you would be able to gather in all these properties and consolidate,
Oh, that's
Anyway,
funny.
it's kind of
One thing,
go ahead.
yeah, one thing that struck me was, I saw this thing about a bard, a poet named Taliesin. And I remember because, where I grew up, Frank Lloyd Wright and his Taliesin, what I found out means shining brow. Whatever. But, I was wondering why he took that for, the name of his compound there near Spring Green, or the one in Arizona, east and west, Taliesin East, Taliesin West. He was a strange character, and one of my father's war buddies lived down near there in a little town called Mazomanie. And he said everybody hated to see Frank Lloyd Wright come because, especially to a restaurant, because he'd never pay. He refused to pay. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Boy, that's kind of arrogant.
Yeah, well, I think he was, especially this time. I mean, he was an old man by this time.
Yeah, he's like, I'm a famous guy. I don't need to pay.
Yeah.
Who's going to arrest me?
So, and this is after my dad had passed away, but Ernie kept coming up, and he'd come back up with some rhubarb every year.
Sure.
And, we'd sit out in the back porch and talk as long as we didn't have 7 feet of snow or something.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a great story. I would love it if you could, for next month, do a little research on Taliesin and see if you can figure out why Frank Lloyd Wright chose that name for his the houses he designed, because I think that is a good point, and Taliesin is certainly one of the characters in the Mabinogion that shows up, and of course is also part of the Merlin backstory as well. So yeah, shining brow refers, I think, to a crown on the like a circlet on the forehead.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what that refers to. Or it could reflect on more the wisdom, like not somebody like, shiny. Anyway.
Yeah, we're all dealing with that, I think.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I used to tease my uncle mercilessly about being bald, and so now the joke's on me.
Yeah, especially when your heritage, your genetic makeup.
It's true. It's my mom's brother, and it came through my mom's side, paternal or whatever, right? However that's called. Yeah.
Yeah, mine comes from my father's side. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess it can come from either side.
Yeah, well, it seems to in our case anyway.
Right, so let's keep on here till 2:30. We've got about 4 more minutes. So I think that's a good call to just postpone our discussion of the Mabinogion, and then I'm trying.
Yeah, like I said, I found that very difficult.
Okay, well, I think the audiobooks will make that much easier.
Okay.
And the one I sent you is the one I think is I would like everyone to at least be familiar with that story, because I actually tracked down the stone that's mentioned in this story.
You actually went there?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's kind of handy that we're doing this next month and not now, because what that'll allow me to do is I'll put together a little PowerPoint and kind of take everybody on a field trip to Wales and take
Well,
you
that should
on
be
kind of,
good. Yeah.
yeah, I think that'll be a lot of fun. The intersection between myth and history is so interesting. And that's the thing with the Mabinogion is that you have, clearly they're intentionally mixing myth and history, and it's like they're not necessarily passing it off as um, uh, only history, but it what fascinates me and that we can get into next month is several notes in the book will say this is like off the editor's footnote says this was in order to explain the name of this particular village or this mountain. And I found that to be very much like Tolkien because it's like you start with the word and you say, oh, the word means, uh, you know, revenge. Well, why is it called that? Well, and then you invent a story to kind of like a
Mhm.
backstory, an origin story for that. And again, it's starting with the language and creating a world around it. And that's what we have found to be true about Tolkien.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting because I think if you look back to the the tales that were told,
Yep.
before they wrote anything down. I can't remember when the I think I read someplace, but the Welsh started using written language. But everything was, you know, and a storyteller was considered somewhat prestige there. Uh, that this all stems from about the time the Romans quit Great Britain, okay,
Right.
and everything must have been in chaos and everything like that. So if you look at that, the change and everything, plus the Celtic tribes could never get together on anything, and of course this is their background, they're Celts.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Centralized government is not their forte, but it's
not at
also,
all, no.
and that's their downfall when against the Romans, and then later on you could argue the Anglo-Saxons as well,
Oh
or
yeah,
the English, I should say.
yeah, and then when William the Conqueror comes.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. In fact, most of the castles in Wales, you might know this already, but most of the castles in Wales that are in really good shape, they're all English castles meant to subjugate the Welsh. They built them in Wales as places to which to retreat when the Welsh were in rebellion. Uh, so the ones that are really hauntingly beautiful ruins are all Welsh castles that were knocked down.
Oh really?
Yeah,
Huh.
my favorite one is Dinas Bran, which literally means Castle of the Crows, and it's just incredibly beautiful. Um, uh, I'm just texting Hawk to let him know that we're ready to end here.
Okay.
Let me see if I can. Uh, so Dinas Bran, it's it's a it's a ruined Welsh castle, but the English um, ended up taking it, you know, defeating them and then breaking it down. But I'll just send you a link if you wanted to look at that. It's kind of an interesting little fact there. I love the country of Wales because it's okay. So England surprised me, and you were over there before, right? I think
No,
you've.
I've never been to Europe or any
Okay, I
place.
thought maybe you were stationed there once. Well, anyway,
No, no.
England really surprised me because, like, oh, even though it's been lived on, the land has been like lived on, like farmed, etc., for thousands of years, and yet there's a fair amount of wildlife. It's kind of interesting that way that a number of things have kind of adapted to that. But Wales feels more wild.
Uh-huh.
There's less. Um, there's more of parts of it that are um, have not changed as much, and so you just find the stone remnants of a Roman road in the middle of a forest, and you'll stumble across, there'll be hill forts, like the ditches that were dug during the Iron Age, and it, and then the woods and the wildlife, and it's just it's just a magical place. And I think that's why it's captured so many people's imaginations. But the language is also quite complex. And so I think the people also tend to be a bit more reserved in terms of compared to maybe Irish. Um, of course, this is a stereotype, but the Scottish are supposed to be very dour and kind of gloomy, and the Irish are, passionate,
Yes.
and but the Welsh are just more thoughtful. I mean, the stereotype is that they're the ones who remember, and so um, they're a lot of their stories, actually, a lot more of their stories from the old days were passed down compared to um, the Gaelic, Irish or Scottish ones.
Mhm.
Interesting too, the Manx, the Celts also lived on the Isle of Man. It's pretty small compared to everything else, so it doesn't usually get thought of as a Celtic area, but there's the Isle of Man in between Wales and Ireland. And then you also have Brittany, which when the Anglo-Saxons invaded, a number of the Celts actually left the British Isles completely and crossed over to Brittany, which is not far away. But it's a peninsula of France that's they must have had some kind of cultural connection there already. So, and that's why Brittany and Britain look
Well, I
familiar.
mean, where do the Celts first come from?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they came from Europe, right?
Hmm.
Proper? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They did, and it seems like they kind of spread out, but it was their culture seemed to only kind of survive, kind of along these edges of where they
Yeah.
once been. Yeah. So I don't know. There's probably a great amount of Celtic DNA probably in lots of people in Europe. Um, Spain and Portugal are interesting that way too because they've got all sorts of different things mixed in there.
Yeah. That's because if you read about the people who emigrated to England, the British Isles back then, back in the day, you're talking about folks saying, the Jutes who were Dane people, and
Yeah, kind of.
yeah, and not only the Anglo-Sac, the I can't pronounce the Anglo type name, but you know what I mean.
The
And the
Angles, the
Then the
Saxons,
Saxons, yeah,
yep, the Jutes.
yeah, and then of course you got the Vikings coming down, and some of them stayed, and so it's kind of a big mix, um, different
Right.
folks that came in. Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's a very fascinating time period. So, for those of you who might happen to listen to us, um, Hawk, I was going to let him kind of announce this at the end here, but so this is the Tolkien Society um, June 2023 meeting. Um, Once a year for the last, oh boy, 15 years now. No, it's more than that. I think it's 17 or 18 years. There's been an annual Tolkien Moot role playing kind of a mini convention that Hawk has hosted, and this year, due to staffing shortages and other challenges. Oh,
Hey
here's
there.
yes. Hello.
Go ahead.
I,
Go to what you're
I
saying.
would you like me to
No,
kind of share?
you're on the right track. Just go ahead and.
All right. Yeah, so just due to staffing shortages and other challenges, we're just trying to carry on with keeping the RPG Research Community Center, open and going. We unfortunately have had to postpone the Tolkien Moot Mini Con, and the dream is not dead, but it's just we're just deferring it, and so we regret that, but we also know that there's only so much that can be done. So right now, we carry on here at the Ea Tolkien Society with our love of Tolkien's writings. And, for those of you who love role playing in Middle Earth, there's still great things going on, and we hope to return to that at some point in the future. I certainly do, as a game master or lore master for the One Ring role playing system. The second edition came out last year, and they just came out with a new module, which I need to get, but it looks good. Anyway, that's all we had to say. We're going to defer the discussion of the Mabinogion and its influence on Tolkien till next month when Anthony and Chris will join us. But that's all for this month.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian and Gary. Appreciate it. Hope the chat went well. I'm sorry the others weren't able to make it. So what is the date for next month to get together?
Yeah. And so we're looking at probably, if we go to the third Saturday of July, that would be July 15.
All right. So July 15th will be the next Tolkien Society right here. Our website's tolkienscholars.org. Our YouTube channel is youtube.com/Tolkien Scholars. And you can catch all the, couple of decades of past broadcasts and everything and special guests and all the other things through the website and through the YouTube channel and such. Thank you all so very much. Have a wonderful weekend and happy Father's Day. And wherever you may be well and Namarie.
Namarie.
Not Ed.